समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
To this story, the world hasn't been paying much attention. Even though President Donald Trump has been threatening war against countries from Venezuela to Nigeria, and he's been engaged with building a blueprint for Gaza, there's been almost no discussion of the jihadist ascendancy in the Sahel, the vast swathe of desert running across North Africa. What will this mean for Al-Qaeda, until recently deemed to have been crushed forever? The stark reality? It's on the verge of capturing its first nation state. And we'll be looking at how and why this happened in this episode of The Print Explorer. From the stage erected in the endless sands outside Timbuktu, the desert blues played for the last time before the war. The lead singer of U2, Bono, was there that night in early 2012, together with Robin Plant, Basiku Koyate, Kera Arbi, the Ali Farka Toure All-Stars, and Tinari Wen. The festival was a personal success for its organizer, the musician Mani Ansar, a gesture of defiance against the growing terrorist violence that had begun to sweep over Mali and the great open spaces of the Sahel. The one person missing was one of Mani Ansar's oldest friends, with whom he'd once spent evenings on the sand listening to music. Led by that friend, a man called Iyad Ghaly, jihadists of Ansar Din rolled into an army camp in northeastern Mali just 4 days after the music festival, killing 100 people, some by a shot through the head, others by slitting their throats. The last time Mani and Al-Ghali had a serious conversation had been back in 2003, soon after Iyad had a religious experience and discovered political Islam. Life, Iyad told Ansar, was, I quote, like a waiting room in an airport when you're in transit. The festival in the desert, the jihadists went on, won't speak well for you before God after you are dead. Gently, Mani Ansar tried to make a joke of it. He promised to become a monk when he turned 50. No, that's too late, Ghaly replied. You don't know if you're going to die today. Last week, insurgents under the banner of the Al-Qaeda affiliated Jamaat Nusrat ul-Islam wal Muslimin, or JNIM, choked off routes from neighboring Senegal and the Ivory Coast, denying fuel to Mali's capital, Bamako. Tensions between Mali's armed forces and the Russian mercenaries fighting with it have crippled efforts to push back JNIM. Led by Ghaly, JNIM could thus become the first Al-Qaeda affiliate to actually conquer a nation state should its siege of Bamako succeed. Like Afghanistan, Mali could become a staging post for jihad operations across Africa, the Middle East, Europe, and beyond. This debacle hasn't surprised experts. In two back-to-back coups staged in 2020 and in 2021, a junta led by Colonel Assimi Goïta seized power from the government of President Bah Indo and Prime Minister Mokhtar Ouane. Though Colonel Goïta promised an end to corruption and to restore sovereignty by evicting French troops, he spent much of his energies on purging the military of supporters of past regimes. Even though Mali gained some military aid from Turkey and Russia, this proved inadequate to push back the insurgency. The Casablanca-Nouakchott-Bamako corridor has been cut by JNIM, and the commune of Diema in the Kayes region is also under siege. The Abidjan-Bamako corridor is also disrupted, and even the internal route between Bamako and the city of Ségou in the northeast has come under attack. In other words, the country is splintering. To make things worse, abuses by the military and its mercenary partners have fractured trust between different ethnic groups. Entire villages now refuse to cooperate with the National Armed Forces, scholar Ramayade and Hussein Ba recently wrote, while community militia have taken control of swathes of territory to fight back against an epidemic of kidnapping and looting the government seems to be unable to do anything about. Even if Bamako does eventually succeed in pushing back against the threat, it's clear a long grinding war lies ahead, in which the forces of the government have less than an even odds of victory. Like so much else in the post-colonial world, the story of how Mali's Islamist movement began is enmeshed with its experience of imperialism. French colonialism notionally promoted secularism, anthropologists Robert Launay and Benjamin Suarez have observed. But its traumatic impacts led to the growth of what they call an Islamic sphere. Fleeing colonial wars, serving as soldiers in Europe, recruited as laborers, or as slaves freed to come home, millions were pushed to seek an identity outside the traditional tribal structure of society. Islam seemed to offer a new language of belonging and being. In the 1930s, anthropologist Mike McGovern has noted, small numbers of Salafists emerged across the Sahel, emerging from a new class of traders who used the sect's far-right message to challenge the syncretic Islam and the traditional political power of elites. The government of Moussa Traoré, which took power in a 1968 coup d'etat, used Islam thus as a tool to secure its legitimacy. The government of General Amadou Toumani Touré, which overthrew Traoré in 1991, prohibited political parties based on religion, but by then Islam had carved out a space for itself in the country's civic life. Figures like the anti-Islamist Sufi Sharif Usman Madani Haidara emerged as religious rock stars, catalyzing public anger against corruption and misgovernance. At the other end of the spectrum, though, were figures like Imam Mahmoud Dicko, a neo-fundamentalist who would go on to offer his support to jihadists fighting the state. Among the forces which laid the foundations for the role of religion in Mali's public life was the Tablighi Jamaat, a proselytizing order founded in India in 1926. In 1999, historians Baz Lecoq and Paul Shriver recorded, 4 Pakistani-origin missionaries arrived in Kidal in North Mali, speaking the Tablighi Jamaat message of new conservative pietism. The organization had the support of important Pakistani leaders like then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, but it also appealed to some Muslims who were resentful at cultural changes like the growing freedoms of women. The Tablighi Jamaat was far from universally popular. Its Bangladeshi origin mercenaries in Timbuktu were largely ignored, and many Sufi clans in Kidal rejected its message, but it did attract some important recruits. Key among those recruits was a whiskey-swilling, serial womanizing insurgent commander, yes, you guessed it, called Iyad Ghaly. Ghaly had long fought with ethnic Tuareg seeking an independent nation they called Azawad. The colorful Ghaly came to be known as the Lion of the Desert. In the 1990s, if you arrived at Iyad's door in the mornings and the guard said that he was indisposed, then he had been drinking all night, Lecoq and Shriver wrote. If you arrive now at his door and the guard tells you that he is indisposed, it means he has been praying the whole night. From a first-person account by journalist Joshua Hammer, Ghaly had made contact with the Tablighis in Kidal around 2002, just after the dramatic events of 9/11. The Pakistanis are up there converting all the Tuareg rebels, one of Mani Ansar's friends told him. They're all becoming devout. Even Ghaly, Ansar learned, was going to mosques on a regular basis and had expressed keen interest in what these strict Muslims had to say. Later, Ghaly took a job in Saudi Arabia but was expelled from that country after he apparently made contact with some Islamists there who the kingdom didn't like. Back home, without work, he became more and more enmeshed with religion. Ghaly, Hammer recorded, gave up his rich diet of lamb and couscous, his bespoke suits and embroidered boo-boos. He seemed to subsist on nothing but milk and dates, and he dressed in a white jalaba, the long Middle Eastern robe, and short trousers that ended well above his ankles. He removed all photographs and paintings from his house, made his wife wear the veil known as a hijab, and kept her confined to the home. And he began giving away his prized possessions, handing his expensive Rolex watch to another former Tuareg rebel. Following 9/11, Mali's government shut down the Tablighi Jamaat and deported many of its preachers. The jihadist movement, though, had got its own momentum by then. Faced with growing pressure from the Algerian security services, the jihadist group Islamic Armée, or GIA, retreated into the Tuareg territories of northern Mali. There, in 2007, the GIA merged with Al-Qaeda. Figures like Ghaly brokered ransoms for Western nationals kidnapped by Al-Qaeda and also profited from trans-border smuggling in oil, minerals, and even cigarettes. Even though the GIA's brand of very aggressive Islamism found little support among most of the Tuareg, Al-Ghaly still found there was reason to abandon his black label for the black flag of the jihadists. In 2011, the Tuareg secessionist National Movement for the Liberation of Azawad had rejected his effort to become its supreme leader. In response, Ghaly founded a new jihadist organization called Ansar Deen in alliance with Al-Qaeda. The crisis that was coming was sparked off by the collapse of Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi's regime in 2011. Thousands of Tuareg mercenaries who'd been recruited by Gaddafi to fight his wars returned to Mali carrying their weapons with them. Effete and corrupt, Mali's armed forces collapsed. Far superior in their organization and resources, Ghaly's jihadists turned on the nationalists after the capture of Timbuktu, decimating their one-time allies and pushing south towards Bamako. Faced with an Afghanistan-like disaster, France stepped in, ordering airstrikes with its Rafale aircraft against advancing jihadist columns. Timbuktu, home to some of the world's oldest collections of manuscripts and arts, ended up ravaged by the jihadists anyway. Facing the sun as it set over an immense ocean of white sand, the secret door of the Mosque of Sidi Yahya was built to stand, it was said, until the very end of time. To enter the mausoleum that lay beyond it, local legend held, would bring disaster to Timbuktu. But in 2012, armed with pickaxes and a bulldozer, Ansar ad-Din jihadists tore down the 5-century-old mosque and dug up the graves in the courtyard inside. Local residents were forced to assemble in the city's sun-baked square to witness the hands of petty thieves being amputated, while women were whipped, raped, and forced into marriages. Libraries with thousands of ancient manuscripts were burned down, mausoleums and relics destroyed. Librarians, Hammer's work recalls, stored some manuscripts in secret locations, saving an invaluable part of the world's cultural heritage. The only thing we recognize is the law of God, Sharia, announced jihadist commander Omar Hamhaha. Sharia is a divine obligation. People don't get to choose whether they like it or not. Like in Afghanistan, the Western counteroffensive, the French counteroffensive, succeeded, and Mali's cities were liberated inside a year. The success proved a bit of an illusion, though. French troops, together with the country's armed forces, succeeded in dispersing jihadists across the Sahel. They lacked the numbers, though, to exercise effective control over the region's vast geographical expanse. To the 77,000 police, soldiers, and private security personnel who guarded the last Olympics, Mali had an army of just 7,000. To offset its numerical weakness, Nathaniel Powell records, France ended up allying with various ethnic groups whose atrocities fueled resentment among rival communities. In 2014, France initiated Operation Barkhane, designed to consolidate its military gains by rebuilding state structures. In practice, the political scientist Susanna Wong notes, the bulk of aid being ended up spent on developing the security apparatus in northern Mali. To make things worse, corruption ensured the aid did little for ordinary citizens. It weakened incentives for the elite to develop a genuine productive economy. The following year, a peace deal was hammered out with the Tuareg, but little progress was made on implementing commitments to disarm and reintegrate combatants. The Islamic State and Al-Qaeda adroitly capitalized on this stalemate. Although drone strikes and Rafale jet strikes eliminated many key leaders, the jihadists proved resilient. French President François Hollande had been bathed in cheers by the people of Timbuktu when he visited the city after the eviction of Al-Qaeda. The victory, however, yielded only continued immiseration of the desperately poor country and a war which seemed to have no end. In 2020, when French-backed President Ibrahim Keita was dethroned in a coup d'etat, applause now greeted the colonels who overthrew him. The jihadist threat is in fact rising across Africa. Last year, the United Nations recorded that Islamic State violence is up across the continent, spilling from northern Mali into the continent's central region, as well as Niger and Burkina Faso. In oil-rich Mozambique, jihadists have successfully stormed the town of Parma, and the 14-year-old war against Al-Shabaab terrorists in Somalia is gone nowhere. Nigeria similarly has had little success in fighting Boko Haram, a jihadist group which has claimed thousands of lives in terrorist attacks. That insurgency has expanded again into Niger and northern Cameroon. Tiring of these endless wars, Western governments have largely withdrawn from the chaos that was sparked off after 9/11. Like Afghanistan, they know these countries might well implode, sending shockwaves across the world. But it'll be local people who have to live with them, not the Western states. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of ThePrint Explorer.